Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? We are here with another One Piece video. I know a lot of you guys are super amped about that, but I think I have a schedule set up now because I am playing One Piece a lot more. I think what I'm going to do is Monday through Friday still do Dragon Ball uploads, but I'm thinking about Saturdays doing One Piece uploads, especially if I'm going to play the game more and travel to some events. I did sign up for some of the treasure cups. So I think I'm going to do some uploads on Saturdays for One Piece, but since this is like the week leading up to Christmas and Christmas Eve's on Saturday, not going to upload on Saturday. I'm also traveling, which is where I'll introduce my friend, my teammate Danny, who's here with us as well. We're going to talk about some One Piece stuff today because we've been playing this game pretty hard the past 2 weeks. Like I mentioned in the last video, we're kind of like in the Dragon Ball off season, so why not play some One Piece? It's kind of a nice refresher before we start grinding Dragon Ball again. But yeah, Danny, anything you want to say? Hellos and anything?
Yo, what's up, guys? One Piece is alright.
Yeah, it's still pretty fun in the meantime, and we're competitive players at heart, so we're still here to bring you guys this video. And this video is going to be how to play well. So if you're playing One Piece and you're watching this video, you should probably already know how to play the game. But what we're going to do is we're going to explain to you guys basically what we've picked up over the past 2 weeks of playing a lot in terms of playing properly, playing efficiently. And if you guys are looking to compete in tournaments, this should help you out pretty well. So we have all the leaders here, and one thing we wanted to say in the beginning is just like, since it is set one, take advantage of that, meaning the card pool is very small. So you can take the time to learn what every deck does pretty in depth. As more and more sets come out, it's gonna be harder and harder to do that and learn like rogue matchups. But now you can learn what Kaido does, Zoro and Kid, those are all the meta decks. You can still take time to learn what Doflamingo does, what Crocodile does. It can be very beneficial. You wanna know what turns your opponent can remove your stuff with their removal effects and what type of beaters they're gonna play. But yeah, Danny, anything you wanna touch on with that?
No, yeah, we're obviously this is not all the leaders. Law is like one of the other big leaders. We're just gonna do it for like color and like exactly what cards they could play.
Yeah, so for Kaido, it's important to know on 6 they can kill your 4 or less. On 10 they can wipe your whole board. Zoro on like 6 Dawn they can play 2 Rush Zoros. Like that's important to know. Kid on 8 Dawn they can play their 8-drop boss monster. Like these are all really important things to know. We're not going to go over all those in this video. This is more like general stuff, but just know there are nuances per matchup, and that's kind of why we want to talk about all these leaders. So we are just going to display some Dawn here because we're going to use those to kind of demonstrate what we're talking about. Also, if you want to make custom sleeves, 10% off the link in the description real quick. But yeah, we're just going to display some Dawn, and we're going to use these to talk about what we want to talk about. So the first tip, I got to shout out Chris Spencer first because he did a really good video talking about the magic number to hit for in One Piece. So if you haven't seen his channel, go check him out, Universe X DBS. He did a really great video talking all about attacking for the magic numbers. We're going to simplify it a bit because 1, he did a really long video on it, but 2, I think it is pretty simple. And we got to also shout out our teammate Matt, who put it very simply. Danny, why don't you tell him what Matt said about attacking in One Piece?
Odds at odds, evens. That's as simple as that.
Yeah, very simple. So a lot of times you're going to be attacking your opponent's leaders, right? And every leader in the game is 5k base power. So just leader to leader is 5k, right? So what you have to consider is in this game, there's counter powers of 2,000 and counter powers of 1,000, right? So with those in mind, swinging for 5 is going to demand a 1,000 if they don't want to take the damage. Swinging for 6 is going to demand a 2,000. Swinging for 7 is going to demand a 2,000 and a 1,000. So with that in mind, since your opponent's leader is an odd number, you always want to attack for an odd number, meaning a 7 or a 9, because it's going to demand that many 2Ks, right? And that's one of the reasons why I find Doflamingo so cool. Like, I like playing this deck a lot as more of a casual deck, because he's oftentimes going to swing for 7 because of his leader skill. So he's swinging at the leader, you're paying the additional Dawn, playing guy from top of your deck or whatever, but the cool thing is he's swinging for 7, so if your opponent's at that 3 life or at that 2 life, he demands, 2 and 1 or, 2 2s. And a lot of times, the 2Ks are the purely defensive cards in your opponent's hand, meaning they might even dump extra 2Ks when they don't have to. But Danny, go ahead and say
Yeah, you could signal. You can also tell. Of course, if you swing 5 and they combo 2, then that's a signal to start going 5s, right? Because they don't have 1s.
Yep.
Vice versa, of course. You see, like,
yeah,
maybe they combo two 1s on a 6. Which is a less common attack, of course, but that just signals and you could adjust your attacks. And I guess disclaimer, Zoro's always swinging for 6, right? But you can't feel bad about that because that leader effect is giving you more value in other ways.
Right, yeah. So Zoro, that's a very specific situation where your 2K is going to be extra valuable. But yeah, generally, you want to swing odds to odds. And it's the same thing for swinging at character cards as well. It's also very relevant swinging at character cards. Some characters have even numbers. So there you want to swing like 8 if you're trying to kill like a 6K, right? And one more thing I want to talk about with attacking for correct numbers is if your opponent has a certain amount of Dawn showing up, right? So, for example, let's say this is my opponent's Dawn. They have 3 tapped and they have 2 open. Well, most decks in the game, when they have 2 Dawn open, that means they can use a 4K counter, right? So in that scenario, I could do a few things. Let's say I have my own Dawn here. I can go to 7, which means if they want to use their 4K counter, they're going to over counter, right? I can go to 9, which means if they want to use their 2K counter, they need to do that and still use a 1K to get out of it. But what would be really bad there is going for 8, right? If I attach 3 Dawn to my leader and swing for 8, that's really bad because their 4K counter gets them out of it for 1 card, and that was just us not using our Dawn efficiently. Now, Danny might disagree with this, but in my opinion, if your opponent is completely tapped out, I think swinging for 8 is actually okay because it still demands 2 2Ks, which if my opponent wants to pitch 2 cards in their hand, I'm fine with that. But I think it's only okay to swing 8K if you're going to use your Dawn for other things. And that's kind of part of mapping out your Dawn for your turn. But Danny, what do you think about that?
No, for sure. It's really about where your plays are. I think this game's a lot about mapping like what your turn's going to be like. Oh, I'm going to play a 5-drop. I'm going to have 2 left, but I only need to keep 1. That's the time to swing 6, of course. More Dawn. You swing for 8 and such.
Yeah, and if you have to swing for 6, if that's the best you can do, again, after mapping out your turn, if your opponent's gonna pitch 2K, you take that trade, right? And then for your next turn, they have less defensive stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of more nuances, especially depending on color. Like blue, Love Beam, that's 2 Dawn, right? If you see 1 Dawn, of course you're not gonna be playing around the 4K. Purple, one of the best counters in the game, Blast Breath, it's 1. They're gonna do it all the time. And if they're actually low in cards in hand, you could even actually go 5s. And that will be really awkward, especially if you have multiple swings.
Yeah, if you have multiple swings at 5, they might start pitching 2Ks because that might be all they have. And good job on bringing up that Blast Breath. So I wanted to mention that. I almost forgot about it. But yeah, that's really important. If purple has 1 open, Blast Breath is definitely a 4K you have to consider.
Yeah, red, Radical Beam if they're 2 or less life.
Yeah, that's another good one as well.
Yeah.
Man, Danny's got some smarts in this game. But all right, so next thing I want to go over. That's pretty much it for attacking at the magic numbers. Again, Chris did a really big in-depth video on that, so go check that out. But the next thing I want to talk about is our opinions on deck building ratios. I mean, again, we're not nearly as proficient in this game as Dragon Ball yet. I mean, again, we're going to play this game a lot in the near future, but we have our opinions on deck building. So my opinion is, for a 4-of in this game, it's a bit different than Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball, you draw through so much of your deck that 4-ofs, you're going to see 2 to 3 copies of them most games. In this game, with there being a lot less draw built in, a 4-of, I would say you want to see it early and often, but you're comfortable with seeing about 2 copies per game. Jewelry Bonnie being a key 1-drop for green, you want to of course play 4 because you want to see it early and you don't mind seeing multiples. But another card that's kind of different is the 7-drop Kid Blocker. I play 4 of this because I do want to play this every single game. If I played 3 copies of this, I would be a little bit afraid that there are some games I'm not going to draw this. Even though I don't really want to see it early, I do want to see it. Danny, what are your thoughts on 4-ofs in this game?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it's harder and harder. The reason playing 4 of not comboable counter.
Yeah.
But, of course, if it's part of your main game plan, and, of course, playtesting, you could feel things out, too, with every deck at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. And Danny brings up a really good point with counter power because that actually leads me into my next thing with 3-of. So if you guys watch my kid profile for this game, I play 3 Law and I play 3 Okiku. Now, there are different reasons why I played 3 of these. Law is a 5-drop and he does make for some insane plays, but I really only want to see 1 per game. And again, that's mostly because he has no counter power, but also I only want to play 1 per game. I'm typically not going to play 2 Laws per game. Okiku, I want to play her on turn 2 a lot of the time, and I really wish I could play 4, but I was just playing a ton of games and just getting these hands without counter power, meaning, my opponent was just getting in for damage that I couldn't do anything about. So I decided to go down on Okiku to 3. Again, even though I really do want to see her early, I don't necessarily want to see her often, but I do want to see her early. Maybe I can go back into the deck and cut a card without counter to put a 4th Okiku in. But yeah, without counter power, you got to consider playing 3. 4 if it's absolutely vital. Yeah, go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, and Law, of course, this is for the kid deck. The profile Joey did earlier this week. For red-green Law, you'd play multiple. It's a crucial card to the strategy.
Yeah, and red-green Law is a main playmaker, so it's a bit different. And yeah, again, as we said in the beginning, it's all contextual on what deck you're playing. But yeah, those are just my reasons for playing 3 of these in my specific kid deck, right? But again, law would be a little bit different. So yeah, 3 of, I would expect to see 1 per game. Or if it has no counter power, you want to, just mitigate those hands that don't have counter. And then for 2 of, so in this game, real quick, 1 ofs are probably not super worth unless it's like specifically round table in red where you can just like kill a giant 8-drop or something. But I play 2 Paradise Waterfall. I hate seeing this card early. It doesn't really do anything unless you have blockers in play. So that's why I like seeing 2 or playing 2, because if I have a blocker established, I see this later on in the game. It's perfectly live. I'm willing to see 1 in the late game. Don't want to see it early. That's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, this is specifically for kid too. Like, it's a more mid-game deck, and like it can go aggressive. Of course, Blast Breath is the best counter in the game. For purple, you'd play 4 of Blast Breath. Even if you see it early, it's just too good.
Yeah, absolutely. That card provides so much value that you want to play 4 because it's almost never dead. But yeah, in this deck in particular, I play 2. And then again, 1 ofs only for super niche cases.
Yeah, like you're saying, you don't want to see a lot early, but for a more defensive slow deck like Kaido, yeah, 4.
Yep. Now what I want to talk about is a lot more nuance. We might spend a bit more time on this. What we're going to talk about next is how to dissuade your opponent from all-inning you with their Dawn. And the main way to do that is going to be through the usage of blockers. So here's a pretty key example. Again, this is in the kid deck, an example for the kid deck, but this can also be relevant in any deck you're playing. Let's say you're on your last life and you don't want your opponent to all in. You might also take some things from this. But in the green deck, if I'm playing kid, there are a lot of times where playing this is actually not good, and that's if I have nothing else on my board. If I have nothing else on my board, what's stopping my opponent from loading 10 Dawn into their leader and just swinging 15? Like, what's stopping them? Unless I have like a 10-card hand or something.
The good old stack and drop on top of it.
Exactly, to take 10 Dawn. And that's what's so interesting about this game. Like that is one thing I do really like about this game, is that if you don't use your Dawn for something, you can boost the power of your cards, or you can obviously forego playing cards to boost power, right? That is really cool. But you need to stop your opponent from loading up Dawn and just swinging into this guy, especially if you're in the Kaido matchup. They have a king on board. You don't want them to go 17 at this. You can't defend it, right? So you got to use blockers to do that. Things you can consider, just don't use as many blockers early, especially in that Kaido matchup where they can kill low-cost cards pretty easily. So you might save your Capones for later in the game as opposed to the Zoro matchup where you play the Capones earlier, right? That's one example. But yeah, if I have 2 blockers on board, which thankfully Kid can play 1 from hand, if I have 2 blockers on board, this dissuades my opponent from just putting 10 Dawn in their leader and attacking, because the moment they do that, the moment they overcommit, I'm just going to block, right? So your opponent's now going to have to split their Dawn up differently, and of course it depends on how many attacks they have. But let's say they go 8k at this. Okay, cool. I'm just not going to block. I'm going to use just 1k from hand. Let's say they go, 11 at this. Okay, cool. I'm going to block. I'm going to get my draw, or even if it was a blocker that didn't draw, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's so big. This is like the most extreme example of a card that you want to live. Like, if this lives, you probably win the game in the kid deck. But this is the same thing for, like, say, like a 7k that you want to live. You really want to keep it alive. Want to split it up. And as your opponent, I don't know if you're on the other side of that, it feels so rough. Like, especially if you just go 8, maybe they don't block, and then you use a counter with a card. And now you have even more blockers, and it's super frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there are even scenarios where it's outside of this card. Like, again, I play a lot of kids, so I have a lot of kid examples, but Basil Hawkins, there are times I want to protect him too, because he's going to clear my opponent's board the next turn. In the Zoro deck, I think you want to protect your Rush Luffy sometimes, because he'll get in there past that blocker the first time, he'll probably deal damage, and then you might need that same Luffy to secure the game next turn, in which case you'd want to be protecting him, right? So in that case, in the red deck, you'd be playing your choppers, and again, just dissuading your opponent from all-inning their Dawn on one attacker. I think that's I think there's a lot more nuanced thing where you got to make sure you're managing your blockers correctly. Unfortunately, there are gonna be times where you just don't have blockers in hand, but if that was the case, it probably wasn't correct to play this 8-drop in the first place.
So yeah, you want to going too low, like we're saying, counter. You go too high, you get blocked. So it makes it really difficult.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so that was the nuance thing I wanted to go over. But yeah, I think one of these videos is going over some of the colors and the leaders again, just so you can have an idea of what to expect, right? So I think Zoro, starting off, Danny made a good point earlier, is like this is the one deck where like a quote unquote good player is gonna attack for 6 a lot when in any other deck they probably wouldn't, just because of the leader effect, right? Don 1, the rest of your board gets plus 1k. That gives them a lot of value on the rest of their field to where you might need to pitch multiple 2Ks. So that's pretty much fine there.
Yeah, and Zoro, it's actually funny. Zoro's one of the few decks will probably force 2Ks early.
Yeah.
So maybe later they'll actually not have 2Ks too.
Yeah. Kaido, I get very frustrated playing against this deck. One thing about Kaido that I try to do as a kid player, I guess, I don't really want to play blockers early, and that really just goes back to what we were talking about saving your blockers for later in the game when they're swinging at you big with 7Ks, 9Ks, and 10Ks. So yeah, that's one thing I like to do early against Kaido, especially against the 7-drop king that can just snipe 2 little guys. Yeah, from your end playing Kaido, what are some things that you think people can kind of take advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, forcing a 10-drop Kaido at the wrong time could be like game losing, really. Sometimes you want to actually like go super wide all at once. Like you're saying, save the blockers. You could slam multiple threats down at once, so the 7-drop king is less value. So yeah, and of course you're gonna go aggressive early. You want to be playing like 3 drops to swing more.
Kid, one of the main things about Kid, besides just all the high value cards he plays in the main deck, the leader effect. Got to be very careful about that. And if you're playing Kid, again, what we talked about in the beginning about attacking for the correct numbers is key. Let's say you're playing against purple, and your opponent has 2 Dawn facing up, and you want to go for the double attack on your leader. Well, if you do that and you go to 8, they get out of both attacks with 2 blast breaths, right? So that's something you want to keep in mind. Like 9 would probably be the proper number there, or even 7 would probably be the proper number there, because their blast breaths mean they go too high and they didn't get the max value out of them, or they're going to spend 2k and a 1k. That's it, my thing from the Kid matchup. And then blue might unfortunately be the worst color in the current format. I love the Doflamingo deck, so I hate saying that. But yeah, it is really cool that you constantly swing for 7. Blue does have some annoying removal though, so you got to be careful with that. On turn 7 or 7 Dawn and 9 Dawn, they can kill a lot of your boss monsters, especially in the Kid matchup. Be careful about your 7-drop kids because blue can get those off the board pretty effectively later in the game. But also worry about Marshall D Teach here because he can get small things off the board early. So in Kid, for example, if I play Okiku or maybe Zoro, if I play a Rush Zoro and just leave it inactive for the next turn, stuff like that you got to be careful about with blue. Yeah,
I think it's really interesting in this game. You can like calculate exactly their plays. The card pool's not that big yet. Like they're going to 7 Dawn as Kaido, they're going to drop King. Luffy is an example for this one, for Zoro. It's really interesting at times what you can like, maybe against blue, before they get to 7 Dawn, they may enter 6 Dawn. Maybe you can actually drop a 6-drop or bigger and don't have to worry about getting outvalued by Doflamingo or Mihawk.
Yeah. But anyways, I think that covers a lot of the nuance I want to talk about. We even did get into some matchup specific stuff, so hopefully that helps you guys. But if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. We'll be responding to questions and helping you guys get a bit better at One Piece. Again, I'm probably going to figure out my upload schedule in the new year where I'm going to upload DBS 5 days a week, and then if I do have a One Piece video to share, I'll probably do that Saturday. So feel free to subscribe for One Piece stuff and just expect things on Saturdays, I guess. Hopefully that system works out where all my DBS fans can just get DBS content like normal, because again, that's still going to remain my main game. But yeah, for the One Piecers, I would like to get some content out there, so maybe One Piece on Saturdays, that'd be cool. But thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.